Welcome. Hi, Tracee.
Hi.
So nice to see you.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, I'm so excited for tonight. Thank you to everybody that is joining us for this conversation and joining us for these 4 weeks of Sakara nutrition. It's amazing to be doing this for yourself, taking this time, this focus, this dedication to nourish your body, to put some healthy rituals into place, and to participate in our Sakara Talk Series, which is really about inspiring you, feeding your mind, your spirit. And I know that that is going to be what we're going to get into tonight. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is just how much it can feel like the world is putting pressure on you to go, 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 to do more, to work harder. If you just work harder, you're going to get there. If you just lift heavier weights, if you just run a little faster, if you just add more to your to-do list, get in the ice bath, all these things that feel like really stressful and just hard. And what if the answer isn't in the doing so much, but in the undoing, and in the rest, and in the relaxation? And what if it's not in the thoughts that you're thinking or the things that you're doing, but the spaces between, those liminal spaces, as you call them, Tracee? And so I'm very excited to have Tracee Stanley with us tonight. Tracee is an expert in those in-between spaces, in rest, in rituals, in deep relaxation. Tracee Stanley is a post-lineage teacher devoted to sharing the wisdom of Yoga Nidra, rest, and meditation from more than 28 years of studentship in Shri Vidya Tantra and the teachings of the Himalayan masters. Tracee is a best-selling author of the books Radiant Rest, Yoga Nidra for Deep Relaxation and Awakened Clarity, and The Luminous Self, Sacred Yogic Practices and Rituals to Remember Who You Are. Tracee is gifted in illuminating the magic and power found in the liminal space and weaving devotion and practice into daily life. So please welcome Tracee Stanley.
Thank you so
Yay.
much for having me. Thank you.
We're honored to have you tonight. I feel relaxed just being in your presence. We like to start off every podcast with the question around your mission. What is your mission? What are you here to do?
Mm-hmm. I really feel like I am here to facilitate spaces where people can cultivate a relationship with self-knowledge, with their own inner knowing, with knowing who they truly are beyond the name, the form, the certificate, the degree, the title.
Wow. I mean, that's so powerful. And I love how you were talking, before we started about the power of ritual, because it's not something that I necessarily think of when I think about, I don't know, necessarily like power as the word you used it, getting to know myself. I feel like in this new world of wellness, it can feel like something to just add to your to-do list. So can you talk a little bit about like what one can gain from ritual? What is ritual for? What are we after? And as Whitney, so eloquently started, like, how do we make sure it doesn't feel like one more thing to just do?
That's such a great question. So I think first we need to define what ritual is, because I think a lot of times words become commodified. And anytime you start seeing words that come from a spiritual or a sacred place being used to kind of sell products, or products start becoming named certain things, you know that the definition of that word might start to get watered down. And what I would say is that ritual is the combination of awareness, devotion, and presence. And those are things that mean that you're not doing something in a rote way. You're not doing something out of a habitual way, because we have rituals that we do every single day that we never even think about. And if we can just add a touch of devotion, presence, and awareness to them, they then become more sacred. So we can take an example of something around making our bed in the morning, right? Which is something like, okay, I have this ritual where I just make my bed every morning. But how present are you when you actually are making that bed? Are you saying a simple blessing over the place that you are sleeping, that you are going to spend at least, hopefully, 8 hours a day, a third of your life in? Are you making it in a way where it feels luxurious, where it feels comforting? Where the person who might be sleeping next to you, are you saying a blessing over the space that they're going to sleep in, that over the pillow that they're going to lay their head on? That is, to me, what the difference between ritual and doing something that is unconscious, that doesn't have the presence, that doesn't have the awareness. And as householders, because a lot of us are mothers, a lot of us are parents, our partners, our entrepreneurs. And it feels like, oh, I'm going to be doing more if I add this idea of ritual into my life, as Whitney had said earlier. But it's all in how you are present with it. And if you think about it more as a weaving, as something that you are weaving in the flow of your life, as opposed to something that you have to do, I really think that, and I really love what you said, Whitney, about the undoing, right? The undoing is the thing that allows us to move into being. And when we come into being, we allow ourselves, at least that's been my experience, that I actually become more connected to my creativity, to my heart, and I listen more to my beloveds around me. So it definitely is an undoing more than it is a doing.
And when
And
you
it's
talk about devotion, can you talk about what that looks like? Okay.
Yeah, I love that question. A lot of times I think that in maybe wellness circles and yoga circles and maybe other spiritual circles, when, let's say, we're given a practice, it feels like it has the hard masculine edge of discipline. Like something is going to happen. I'm going to be shamed if I don't actually do this, if I don't actually complete this practice, if I don't actually do this every day. And when we think about this idea of softening discipline, we soften discipline, we soften the edges around it, and we make it more about devotion. And devotion is for the love of something. And so the way that we can think about this is think about something that you truly love. It could be your child. It could be cooking. How can you add this idea of love to everything you do?
It's so beautiful. My husband recently has been talking about, for the last couple of years, he's been talking about this idea of what wisdom is. And one of the things he has been saying is that, like, no matter what he's doing, he's just moving his body in different ways. And so, can you appreciate washing the dishes as much as you can appreciate, I don't know, sitting and relaxing, reading a book? Like, it's just a movement of the body. And then I love what you're saying, which is really this mindfulness. And I like your words a lot more, but I'm actually currently getting my master's in functional medicine. And I'm in this class that's the science of mindfulness, which I honestly wasn't looking forward to, because I was like, yeah, I know, I get it. I'm a fan. I like understand the importance of mindfulness, but I've been really pleasantly surprised by the literature behind mindfulness, behind exactly what you're talking about, and how it impacts every aspect of life. And, I could sit back and say, yeah, of course it does. But to really read the literature and watch how it's taking down inflammatory cytokines, It's lowering inflammation. It's changing hormonal patterns. It's changing addictive behavior. It's helping people through trauma. And when trauma is linked to autoimmune disorders, and then you can use these mindfulness practices, these rituals to really get at the trauma response and retrain your brain. I think sometimes when we use these big words like ritual and devotion, it's like they mean so much, but to really understand how they impact you, I think is something that until you start doing it, you think maybe it's a nice to have versus a must. And so when did it become a must for you? Like, did you know from a young age that this ritual, this devotion, this mindfulness, this kind of spiritual aspect of your work, did you know it from a young age? Did you come into it? What was your story?
No, that's such a great, I love what you said, because washing the dishes was actually my entryway into devotion.
Wow. Wow.
And I will also say that there are some new research studies around ritual and the efficacy of ritual to lower anxiety, because it actually creates a foundation of something that is certain in a world where there's so much unknown. So I love that you're bringing in some of the other medical benefits of it, because if we just do a little bit of research, there is a lot of research that's happening right now. And so for me, nobody ever really talked about ritual. Although ritual was all around me. My Nana was a preacher. And so there was the ritual, right, of going to church and going to Sunday school and all the things that happen. But no one ever talked about that as being ritual. What happened when I became a little bit older is I started to realize that there are no rites of passage. We have very few rites of passage in Western culture. Aside from the wedding, aside from the funeral, aside from maybe some other cultural things that are still around, most of us, a lot of us, have been separated from all of the rites of passage, from the rituals and the 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 places of transition that mark the transition in someone's life. Right. And so we talked earlier about this idea of the liminal space. And that word liminal actually comes from the root word lemon, which means threshold. And it literally is the place that is the wooden piece on like the olden doors that would be the in-between space. And so it is the in-between space of marking the transition between being one way, then being in the in-between that is the unknown, which is very scary. At least I know for me, it can be scary. I had to learn to be able to sit in that place of the unknown. And then what happens when you cross over? And so when I started to learn a little bit more about the Dagra traditions in West Africa and all of the beautiful traditions and rites of passage that they had, I started to think for myself that we either have to create new rituals or we have to unearth the rituals that are from old or from our ancestors. And as a woman who comes from enslaved African people from Bermuda and Barbados and also from America, a lot of those ties have been broken. Those ties have been broken. So finding new ritual, finding new ways of creating rites of passage are really important. And for me, I started with this practice of creating the opposite. It's known in the Yoga Sutras as Pratibhakshabhavana. And it's a way to kind of create equanimity. And one of the things that I really can't stand doing is washing dishes. It's like the worst chore ever. And it's connected to childhood punishment, right? It's like in the old days, my dad that would be the punishment. You did something bad, you had to wash the dishes. And if he found, one speck of dirt on the dishes, you had to wash them again. So it's kind of ingrained with this thing of washing dishes means punishment. And so I thought to myself, how can I shift this idea that washing the dishes is something bad? I need to find the love of washing dishes. I need to find the love of feeling the water and the soap and just the movement. And I was able to create a devotion around washing dishes. And that was the actual entry point for me to find something that I really didn't like doing and to try to bring in the quality of devotion back to the presence, the awareness, the intention.
And the undoing.
And the undoing. Yeah.
How powerful. Yeah.
And can you
Yeah.
talk about your path through, you've been studying a certain sect of Tantra, Sri Vidya, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Sri Vidya.
And the Himalayan and the teachings of the Himalayan masters. What is that? Can you talk to us about kind of like how that fell on your path of devotion?
Yeah. So I found the Yoga Sutra 136 many years ago, like 2001 or so. And that sutra talks about this light that lives within each of us that is beyond all sorrow. It is beyond all conditioning. And it is the essence of who we are. And I had been practicing yoga for 4 or 5 years before I read that. And so when I read that, I was like, wait a second, hold on. I think I'm doing the wrong kind of yoga because I want to know about this light that's in me, that's eternal, that is beyond all sorrow. And so I started to look around for a teacher. I started to ask people who I knew who were basically elders in the community, where can I find this? Where can I find this kind of teaching? And I was pointed to the practices of the Himalayan masters. I was pointed to teachers in that tradition and then started to practice. And then one of the things about the Himalayan tradition is that it is basically a foundation of many different practices, but specifically the Yoga Sutras and Tantra. And Tantra was this idea and is this idea that as above, so below. The universe outside of us is exactly the same as the universe that is within our body, that we are a microcosm of the macro. And if we want to affect change, we need to affect change in the microcosm first to reflect out into the macro. If we want to understand the quality of nature, if we want to understand who we really are, we have to understand the qualities of the universe and the fact that we really are nature, that we are the universe itself. And that's something that I think intellectually, it sounds like a really mystical and wonderful idea. But without some sort of experience, it's really hard to hold that. And I had a very early experience before I even practiced yoga around kind of falling into a state of self-knowledge, of feeling the true self, never having the words or the understanding around it because I was not practicing anything. And so when I found this practice of the Himalayan masters and deeper practices into Tantra, it was like, oh, this is all now fitting together. I understand some of what I'm reading, some of what I'm practicing is reminding me. And I think that this all is really a remembering, right? But I'm being reminded of the taste of that light that I had for just a moment that I didn't know what it was, but I knew something profound had happened and that my life really did change from that moment forward.
What I keep hearing from you is just these constant reminders of how powerful we are, that we are part of nature. God lives within us. We are in that, right? And that our thoughts and our energy and our actions have an impact on everything in our life. And when you were talking about the bed, I was thinking about how if a home doesn't get lived in, it'll start to fall apart and break down. But if there's people living inside, somehow that house over the same period of time stays alive and living and fine. And that it's, there's something in us, this light that impacts everything around us, and that we sometimes I feel like even me, almost like I want to hide from God. That, that if I'm trying not to think these thoughts or do these actions, that, maybe it won't be seen, but just having these feelings inside of me or a thought, it all exists within me and outside of me. And it creates an impact on my reality. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just keep thinking with everything that you're talking about like how important it is to have some sort of a practice or ritual around this, to realize like that we're all so powerful. Like how do we come back to that place of remembering that, especially just the world is so busy, life is so busy.
I know. I was going to say off the back of that, like, how did all of that curiosity around our light bring you to rest?
So I'll touch on what Whitney shared first. It's one by one. It's one by one we have to do our practice, because everything, as you said, that we think, everything that we do has an effect on the whole. And if we don't understand that we are in a whole, we are in something, this atmosphere that is psychically connected, then we have a responsibility to think about the things that we say, the actions that we do, and the way that we live in the world. The problem is that we are living with kind of an essential lie, which is that we are not part of nature. Right? So if I drop a bag of Cheetos in a cave, it's not going to affect anyone, right? But no, it can affect an entire biome. The biodiversity of that space could be completely changed and shifted because of one action. Right? And so we really that's the thing we need to wake up to. And it's directly related to rest. It's directly related to the undoing that happens when we lay down. And when we lay down, we don't just lay our heads down and our body down. If we're really practicing deep intentional rest, we're also laying down all of the worries, all of the concerns, all of the disturbing thoughts, just for a few minutes. Right? And so rest is this place that, especially when we're talking about practices like Yoga Nidra, which Yoga Nidra kind of, one of the probably most popular translations of that is the yoga of sleep, or the yoga of conscious sleep, that it is sleep with a slight trace of awareness, right? It is the place where the ego can fall asleep and the soul can awaken. And when we awaken to the qualities of the soul that are light, we understand that we are part of a whole. It's not just that we understand it, we know it at a cellular level. And when we wake up, sometimes we forget, right? We forget. It's like, oh, you're separate. You're not me. What I do has nothing to do with you. We forget, and that's why we have to practice again and again and again and again, because it is our tendency, I believe, as humans, to be in the forgetting. And all of that doing that you were talking about, Whitney, earlier, it's all a distraction. Our overculture is designed to distract us with all of the pretty, cute things that we might want, that we think are going to make us more whole. Right? If I get this face cream, I'm going to be more whole. If I buy this cute outfit, I'm going to be more whole. The fact of the matter is, you are already whole. You are already whole, and people are making money off of the fact that you have forgotten that you are already whole. And we remember our wholeness when we pause and we close our eyes and we let ourselves move into that liminal space of being in the in-between, that's the place where the magic of the wholeness comes back to us in a way that cannot be denied. And even if we just have a touch, a taste of that for a moment, it's enough for us to remember the next time. It's enough to call us back to our practice. And that practice then becomes a devotional practice, because we're practicing, as dear teacher Sally Kempton used to say, we're practicing for the love of it.
Mm. So powerful. What I love how you talked about ritual can be in every moment, like washing the dishes. But I imagine, and I also know from your books, that there is ritual that is dedicated time to ritual. And so, what does that look like? Well, how much time? How do you even start? Where do you begin? Do you start with rest? Do you start with the Yoga Nidra? If somebody is listening to this and saying, okay, I hear that, and every moment I have the opportunity to be in devotion, which I love so much. I was actually doing a high intensity interval training today, which I never do, you guys. Like, I'm such a Pilates girl. I used to be all into like the high intensity workouts when I was younger. And then my 30s hit and I tried something else. And I was like, I can't believe I tortured myself for that long. And so I'm just really not into that. I'm really into like thinking about nourishing myself in every way I can. And typically the high intensity interval training workouts, I don't feel nourished. I feel exhausted. But a friend asked me to go today. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. It's been many years. And, I actually found ritual in it. There were so many moves where I was like, ugh, no, like this is really hard, or I don't know if this is like necessarily the move for the physique I want to create. It felt a little like gym bro-y. And then I just started saying thank you, like thank you to my body for moving, thank you to my abs for working, thank you to my heart for pumping, thank you to my arms for holding me up in that really long plank. And it really, really helped, and it really made it more joyful. So I really know and love and am so grateful for that reminder that every moment can be a ritual. But can you talk us through how to have kind of a more ritualized moment and space?
Yes, I love that. First of all, the gratitude ritual anywhere, anytime is so powerful. So thank you for reminding us about the power of gratitude. What I would say is I would start with the rest ritual. And the reason is because most people that I talk to are exhausted. And when people are exhausted, they don't feel resourced. They don't feel creative. They don't feel inspired. They a lot of times don't feel worthy, right? And so one of the most powerful things that we can do in our practices and rituals is to practice self-inquiry. And so one of the things that I would ask myself would be, do I feel as though I deserve to rest? Am I worthy of rest? Who were the people who showed me the value of rest? Who modeled rest for me when I was growing up? If I want to change, how would I change my legacy to be a legacy of rest? How would I begin to change that legacy? And I would begin with just asking myself those simple self-inquiry questions. And then I would make a list, because, we have to create time for the ritual, because the first thing that most people say is, I don't have time for a ritual. So we have to create a list of things that are the most distracting in our lives, the ways in which we waste time, the list of things that we do that is not life affirming for us, not life enhancing. And I think I could say, I could probably put 4 or 5 things on that list. So hopefully everyone else can put like 2 or 3 things on that list. And then choose one thing that you're willing to give up for the next 7 days. What's the one thing that is not life affirming, that is a habit, that is not a ritual, that is something that is distracting you from being? Give that up for 7 days, and in its place, place an intentional rest practice or a yoga nidra practice. So let's say we just honor ourselves and say 21 minutes a day, even 11 minutes a day, I'm going to practice rest. I'm going to practice yoga nidra. And do that for 7 days and see what shifts, and let that become a ritual. And so we talked about this idea of how you make the bed, right? So how you create the space for you to rest. We call it a rest nest. My dear friend Uma Dinsmore Thule coined that phrase of the rest nest. So we create a rest nest for ourselves. And the thing that I noticed is when I train teachers to train as rest coaches or yoga nidra teachers, when they create the rest nest for themselves, it's very skimpy. It's very, very skimpy. It's like, oh, I don't really need to have a really warm, cozy cover. And when they create it for someone else, it is absolutely luxurious. So we have to ask ourselves, can I create my rest nest as though I'm creating it for my most beloved? Mm-hmm. And then as you create that for your most beloved, you become your most beloved. You become the one that you are devoted to, even if it's just for that 11 minutes or 20 minutes. And then you practice. And the beautiful thing about Yoga Nidra is you can lie down and you can be guided by someone else's voice that is doing the work for you. All you have to do is listen and relax and allow yourself to receive, which can be very hard because
I was gonna say you're making it sound so easy, but
it can show up of like, oh,
yeah.
What's standing in the way? But then again, there's those moments of self-inquiry afterwards where you can take a few minutes just to journal or free write about the experience. And I guarantee you that if you practice Yoga Nidra for 7 days consecutively, you will start to see a shift in your life.
I wear an aura ring.
Oh, I have one too.
It's amazing to see what Yoga Nidra does on your stress levels. Like it just drop down into that restored section, just like whoosh, down into it. And I don't get down there too often, not as much as I should. But I've noticed that with Yoga Nidra, I get there. And it's interesting what you're saying about making yourself your beloved, because I do this for my son almost every night. It's how I put him to sleep. Is I'll walk him through a body scan. I'll tell him to imagine like little rainbows